If we put AI or technology and treat it as an employee, what expectations do we have for it? What's the job description for it? How do we measure that it's doing what it's supposed to do? That's how you treat AI. So this, if you batch together the automations that I have and the different services I pay for, I probably pay about $200 a month for this virtual person, if we call it that, and I treat it as such. So hey, I check in on it. Are you doing what you're supposed to? Are you following through? Are you, how much time did you save me? I know all of that, and I have that information.
Welcome to another episode of Amplify Your Business podcast, where we inspire and empower entrepreneurs to navigate the highs as well as the lows of building a successful business. Today, we're joined by a powerhouse in the world of business strategy and operations, Joshua Monge, a seasoned entrepreneur, fractional COO, an expert in helping small businesses build resiliency and scale with confidence. With over 2 decades of experience, Joshua has guided countless businesses through the complexities of growth, ensuring their systems are robust and their operations run smoothly, even without the founder at the helm. Now, that's the secret. In this episode, we'll dive deep into how small businesses can avoid the pitfalls of dying from success, the power of process mapping and visualization, and the steps every entrepreneur can take to make their business resilient to change and unexpected challenges. Whether you're just starting your entrepreneurial journey or you're looking for ways to push past operational roadblocks, this conversation is packed with actionable insights and strategies to help you build a business that thrives. So grab your notebook and get ready to be inspired. This is a conversation you're not going to want to miss. Welcome to the show, Joshua.
Oh, Lance, thank you so much. That was a great intro. I really appreciate that.
Hey, when we have great guests, you got to have a great intro, right? So before we get too deep into the weeds of what you do from an operational standpoint and really try to extract all that knowledge you've got in your head, I'd like to hear a little bit more about your business. Who are you serving? What kind of businesses do you work with? And what problems are you trying to solve?
So, Think Adapt Build, which is the name of my business, we basically work with service-based businesses from $500,000 to $5 million in revenue. We just found that that's a good place where people are dealing with a lot of complexity. Their business is growing. They're adding members to the team. They're adding processes. They're getting really excited for this next stage. But what they don't realize is that they're adding complexity and they don't have someone in place to manage that complexity. And so by default, everything falls on the founder or the owner. And so then you have an owner that's succeeding, but he's like working more hours and payroll's going up and profitability is going down. And they're like, wait, but we're getting more clients and we're doing more work. Like, why is this not working the way it should? That's the pinnacle moment when they go, okay, we need to get an operations person in here to help fix this and get this sorted out.
Yeah. And this is one of the, I mean, every business, I know mine for sure has gone through this. And I think every business out there does, where you get to a certain place, right, in the growth of your business in which you just can't handle everything. And the operations piece, oftentimes, I think, and I don't know what your experience has been, but I think is probably one of the hats that you need to offload as quickly as possible as a founder, because oftentimes the founder is somebody who's an ideas guy, somebody who is out there, building the relationships and strategizing and everything else. And so the operations tend to be something that maybe starts to slip a little bit. And like you said, then profitability is the thing that really suffers.
Yeah, and it's profitability is one of those things that kind of sneaks up on you because those
Yeah.
tasks that you have to do that are of lower value, you have the founder that's supposed to be billing at X, let's say, $200, $300, $500 an hour, yet they're the ones that are checking emails and doing like administrative updates, which are, 10, 20, whatever. It's admin work that could be done by somebody else. And so making sure that we're paying attention to what that process looks like and then getting those tasks assigned to somebody responsible for it and then setting that up. And to what you were saying, it definitely becomes a process problem because you might hire people that do very big sections of work, but then it's those small little tasks, someone's going to do it. And so who's paying attention to that? We just, you need someone at some point to look through the whole thing and go, okay, let's reconnect some of these pieces and let's reorganize this a little bit.
Yeah, yeah, completely. And so I'm curious because you are an entrepreneur yourself, right? And so this role as being a fractional COO for other people, how has being an entrepreneur yourself really kind of informed the way that you approach the work that you do with the other businesses that, that you're supporting, that you're out there helping?
Yeah, that's a good point. I definitely have lived these experiences, and
Yeah.
the reason why this current business setup that I have is succeeding is because I actually ran a very terrible business for quite a few years. And so I've learned through the school of hard knocks on how not to do things. I've hit my head on the wall, I've tripped, I've fallen, I've made stupid mistakes. And so this new version, I've taken those lessons and learning. Plus, I used to be a director of economic development for a local chamber. I did that for 3 years, and I helped hundreds of businesses in various stages and various, you know, situations. And so I got to learn from their mistakes and talk them through things. And so I think the combination of those two, it's not just book knowledge, and it's not just, oh, I saw somebody else do this, but it's things that I've experienced myself that I'm like, oh my gosh, it'd be really great if you just jump over this puddle, but when you jump over this puddle, watch out for this other thing that's going to be right after it. And so
Yeah.
I can kind of give you the lay of the land and kind of give you the cheat code to kind of get through some of this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, and that's exactly what we're looking for today is some of the cheat code. I know we're not going to be able to get into everything, obviously, but I want to touch on some of those things that you've learned along the way, some of the things that you see as common challenges or hurdles that most businesses are really facing. So you touched on earlier here just a little bit around, like offloading some of the tasks that you really shouldn't be doing as a founder, that the high value people in your business that you can bill out at appropriate levels. What they should be doing is different than what maybe you offload to an EA or VA or somebody, a little more junior in the organization. So besides that, what common mistakes do you see organizations doing or business owners doing that they really could change and have a profound impact on the growth of their business and the business resiliency?
Yeah, I think I want to go back to that just a little bit to kind of repave that road again to say yes, definitely do. And every entrepreneur has probably told this right out the gate: do a time audit of your time and track all your tasks, and then find those lower value tasks that you can assign to somebody else. Definitely do that. I mean, that's kind of step one. Step two then is learn how to delegate and ensure that that work actually sticks with the person that's supposed to do it. Because when you are an entrepreneur, and I've done this with my own team, I give them a task and then I follow up with them like 30 minutes later, or I follow up an hour later, and I'm chasing this thing down, and then it gets to a point where we have our meeting and they didn't do it, and it's not done the way I want. So then I go and redo the task. That's that's it defeats the whole all of that work you did to get that off your plate. Now it's back on your plate. So
Yeah, yeah. Don't fall into that trap of if you want it done right, you better do it yourself, kind of thing, right?
yeah,
That's
yeah.
that's not where we want to live.
Now we want to get to is 80% done by somebody else is 100% awesome. And I'm
Yeah,
going to borrow that from Dan Martell.
I love that.
So the idea then is that person that's doing that job, they're not going to do it perfect. They're going to make mistakes. Great. So build into your time, into your management process, knowing that that work you're going to hand off, it's not going to be 100%. But if it's better than 50%, hey, you didn't have to do it, and then you can make small tweaks and continue to improve on that. And so I think when you delegate, make sure that the person understands the tasks that they're supposed to do, when they're due, has a clear definition of what done looks like, and then also empower that person to make decisions on some of that. So, when you tell someone, hey, listen, you can do all this, here's the ordering process, here's the follow through, etc., put a limit on that to say, like, and if it gets over $500, then reach out to me and let me know. But anything under 500, knock yourself out, and then total accumulation, keep it under 1,000. Very simple control, so then people can then run with some of that authority. And if there is a problem, at the worst it's going to be a $500 mistake, and it then that takes a lot of that off of you. And so pass it along, make sure that you have the descriptions and everything in place with that, and then be open that you're going to have to fix it, but ideally you're only fixing a smaller percentage than the whole thing.
Yeah. And then obviously, as you're training your staff, as they're starting to build some competence, that I would think would start to decrease, right, in certain areas of the business.
Yeah. And then the other one, and I actually wrote an article on this, and I borrowed the idea from somebody else, of course, but the idea that when you delegate to the staff, sometimes they're going to come back and have questions. Great. To keep yourself from having to jump in and take it over, have that person, when they bring you that problem, have them bring one problem, give you three solutions, and then make one recommendation. And so if you can practice that, that's great. Because I actually got off a phone call the other day with the CEO that was having this problem. She was like, I'm always putting out everybody's fires. It's like, okay, well, what did they do to kind of remediate some of that before they came to you? And she's like, what do you mean? I was like, so they just came to you and like, this isn't working? And she's like, yeah, pretty much. I was like, oh my gosh. Okay, let me show you this thing. It's called a 131, one problem, three solutions, one recommendation. And she's like so excited because she's like, great. So then it's going to get them to think about it, to actually try to troubleshoot a little bit. And so I had a different CEO that we did this with, and they did that. Because I assigned them, well, what, you have to do 131 this week. She was so excited to tell me the story. She went through it. She goes, the one problem, they nailed it. The three solutions, I hated all three of them. She goes, but at least I knew they tried something.
Yeah.
And so she was like, it actually made me easier to come up with the fourth option for them and say, go run with this fourth option. But at least it got pre-processed and pre-chewed before it got, to the CEO to have to deal with.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the things is that sometimes we expect our team to be able to critically think the way that we would go through that process, right? And so, yeah, they might not end up, the first time around or the first few times hitting on a potential solution that you would wholeheartedly agree on, but it's that process of getting them to start working that critical thinking muscle that is really important, right? And then you can start to help fine tune that, and then you get to a place where they're coming to you with fewer problems because they've already started to figure out what the solution is, and then they just move forward, right?
Yeah. And then on that note, as they're succeeding, then you can also increase their, kind of permissions.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I had another CEO that she sent me this like big long email chain. If you printed out the whole thing, it could be a nice little book. And it was about a $50 receipt that was missing on like a $10,000 job. And they couldn't bill it or something because of the $50. And the CEO was like, it's $50. Like, just bill the damn thing. Like, we'll figure out the $50 later. But it was a big thing that the staff spent actually quite a few hours on trying to figure this out. And so I asked her explicitly, like, well, up to what dollar amount can they, make decisions? She goes, oh, I haven't thought of that. I was like, okay, well, maybe at the lowest levels, give somebody a $50, fixing, and then, managers, supervisors keep increasing the value of that. And then as those people demonstrate success, then increase their permissions. And so that's less work that's going to be coming to you that you're going to empower people to solve and take care of.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Cool. So you've given us a few things. Any other big common mistakes or challenges from an operation standpoint that you're seeing just commonly hitting as you're working with these businesses?
So I just had a meeting just before this. I was asking someone about the inventory tracking process that they have for, it's an interior designer. And I was like, okay, where is the master list of all the inventory you're ordering and the status of each piece? And she opened up 3 documents and was like, well, we keep some of it here, and we keep some of it here, and we keep some of it here. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, so where's the one source of truth? Like, of all these 3, if I knew nothing else, where would I look?
Yeah.
And she's like, well, it should be this document. I'm like, great, let's call that document the source of truth. So with your business, I know with like different service businesses, Joe does it this way, and Bob does it this way, and Chuck does it this way. And, some of them will fill out the forms, or some of them will or won't follow all the processes. And then they keep documents in different places. I have hard, fast rules when I get engaged. All the documentation goes in one place. And then if we said we're all agreed that this is where we're all going to update information, whether it's a project management system or an Excel document or whatever, make sure that everyone is putting that information in there, and then take it to the next step. Who is in charge of that documentation? and then gets to be the person that's like, hey, you didn't update this today, give me what we need. And usually there's not somebody in charge. Everybody is in charge of making sure they do it, but nobody's in charge of making sure it gets done.
Yeah.
So we want to assign someone like the chief overseer of like, check in the morning, check in the afternoon. Did everybody do the updates in the system? Whether it's a CRM system and sales leads, or it's a PO processing. I mean, whatever the system is, make sure that there's one person that's in charge of that to get that done.
So part of this, I would think, rolls into process mapping, right? So talk to me a little bit about that. Do you encourage them to visualize the processes? Is this an itemized listing of who's supposed to be doing what and when? How do you walk through that exercise with your clients?
So when we have these conversations, I've always found that when people are, oh, this is what we do. Okay, great. Can you show me? And they have things all over. There's not a clear visual for it. So doing process mapping, I've had some people comment like, well, these businesses are too early stage for that. I'm like, no, this is a great time to practice this. So essentially what you do is look at a process that you think you've got 100% down. Great. Create a little box for each of the different steps that you take, and then link all those pieces together. And then if you want to take the advanced level of this, basically assign lanes for each person. Imagine the boxes live in a lane, whether it's 1, 2, or 3, and then put those in the right place. And then start connecting those pieces. And very quickly, you're going to see like, oh, the salesperson will do the sale, and then they'll fill out the client intake form, which then they pass to customer service. Customer service then will process. And so you can see how everybody interacts and passes information through. And then when you do that, you can very quickly find where there's bottlenecks, where there's problems. It's not to feed the fuel in this too much, between sales and operations, but, it's always sales' fault when operations doesn't get what they need. I'm just kidding. Just seeing if your people are listening. But making sure that sales can't submit documentation unless it's 100% complete. If it's 100% complete, by the time it gets to operations, then operations knows that they have everything they need to keep moving things forward. And so they're not, and so by doing that process visualization and mapping, you can see where the steps are. And then if you share it with your team, you can say, well, sales, the reason why we need 100% accurate information is billing and fulfillment, and everything else is all contingent on the data that we get at the very beginning. And so when you forget to get those pieces of information, essentially at a later point, that's going to create problems. And so we want to move those quality concerns and the data capturing as early as possible. And so you can have a visual map, and so people can actually see where they are and why they have to be concerned, not just about their job, but them receiving information and them giving information to other people on their team. And we almost push it as far as think of everybody as a customer in the business. And so when you're passing information to the next person, are you giving 100% what they need? Is it accurate? Is it complete? Are you actually providing that? And when you don't, that's like bad customer service. And so we don't want sales and operations fighting, right? We want them to love each other and work harmoniously. And so how do we do that? Is by making sure that everybody's happy and getting what they need.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think like you joked about it a little bit, but I mean, that is the rub oftentimes is you've got people bringing the business in, and then you have operations trying to satisfy the delivery of that. And without the right information, it just creates so much chaos within the business, errors, which then turn into rework, which then erodes profitability, efficiencies aren't there. And so this is a real thing. As much as it is kind of funny, we can joke about it. We're joking from a place of like, yeah, this happens all the time is the problem. Like we can all relate to this, right?
Well,
and so, yeah.
And especially with like sales, they'll do the best they can to capture as much as they can, and then operations then has to go do the follow up on it. Well, why is the person doing fulfillment having to do phone calls and chase down the customer to do this when that's kind of not their primary focus?
Yeah.
And there is kind of this concept of a hidden factory where you look and you're like, what do you guys do with these when they're not complete? Oh, we give them to Mary, and she only works on Fridays. And so your whole flow, you thought everything was flowing through and everything else, but you've got this real workaround or these other little things going on. And so you want to capture those too, because nobody wants to get in trouble, or nobody wants to feel like they're not doing their job. And so when there's ambiguity or uncertainty, you get weird results and people do weird things. And so you want to get
Yeah.
that stuff out of the way.
So, do you recommend any particular tools, apps, anything like that that people could use then to help with that process mapping exercise and really defining what the roles, the responsibilities, what the checks are that have to be basically crossed off before it moves on to the next stage?
Yeah, I try to provide solutions that are tool agnostic, but I can
Hmm.
give you kind of a list. So
Sure.
one, it's the old school pen and paper. Just draw it out and start there. I have a whiteboard that's right here. I still whiteboard things, and then if you look behind me, I've got little graphs and whatnot. I use Lucid Chart for that. Miro has a good option. There's a couple other. I think Word document does a little bit of that. I mean, there's enough people that do like mind mapping or process mapping in some form that just get it started and get something on and documented, and then improve from there. Because once you actually write things down, it's like when you do goal setting too, right? Like if you write down your goals, they found that people actually achieve them or make more progress on them. So with process mapping, you think you've got this process nailed down, document it and draw it out, and then see how nailed down you've got it.
Yeah.
And the fun part, and I tell people to do this too, is great. You as a CEO, this is how the process runs. Now go talk to each of those different departments and ask them how the process runs and draw that. Now you're going to see where there's conflicts in what people perceive as happening, and
Yeah.
now you know where to go start finding fixes.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And one of the things that I'm always amazed. So prior to me having a marketing agency, I ran a strategic consultancy, and so I would go in and I'd help some organizations with some of the process mapping. I didn't go, I wasn't a full-on COO fractional support, but in some of the projects that we were working on, they needed that support, so I jumped in and helped out, and it's amazing. So you probably have a ton of stories about this. Just you go in and like people have no idea what the processes are supposed to be, right? And
Yeah.
there's like massive gaps, and it's just there's at times you are scratching your head as the consultant going, I don't understand how any business actually happens here because there's chasms
Oh,
between these
yeah.
steps.
No, I'll share one.
Yeah.
It's a buddy of mine. He's got a lead generation business. Really great guy, really smart. But I was like, when I initially met him and he knew he needed help, I was like, let's do some process mapping. And he's like, oh, I've got that down. I was like, okay, cool. Give me your best shot. Like, what's the thing that you got down? And he's like, here it is. It's 10 steps. We've got this nailed. Oh, and I looked at his documentation. It was it was like scratchings on the back of a napkin. Like it was, I mean, at least it was something. I was like, okay, man. I was like, so let's just go through this. And so I talked through it. And because I understand process and I understand inputs, outputs, all of that, I started adding some more elements like pauses. When you pass something from one person to another, especially if they work asynchronously, there's a delay in that. And so you need to capture that. And so I captured delays. And then I showed them data capturing, like when you capture client information, like, okay, great, here's a data source. How do we make sure that this data source goes through the whole process along with everything else? And so we started building these complexities in there. It wound up being a 35-step process.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he thought they could get it done, best shot 12 hours, like no problem. And it wound up taking 3 days because we added in the delays and then we added in like quality checks. He's like, oh man. He goes, I think I'm worse off than I thought I was. Like, as far as where he perceived things were, and then where, based on the documentation, like the complexity level that he was at. And so we went through it a couple times, and then I teach people how to do this too. So the idea then is you guys could, eventually they could do it themselves, or people could start looking and start diagnosing these things. Um, and then you start building those out. And with those maps, and you know this, but I'll say it for the benefit of your audience. One, it helps you get through that immediate problem and kind of see that. But then what you do is we take all of those steps and we put it in an Excel document, and then we put time elements to it. Now you know how long each steps take. Then we take it and we put the people's salary and costs in there. Now you know exactly how much this process costs you. Then we put in quality checks and quality problems, we can see what the frustration levels are. We go talk to people on the floor that do these different steps. We ask them, hey, how frustrated are you with this step 1 to 10? And we document that. Now you've got a document that not only gives you the visual of everything going on, but can be used for time estimations, could be used for cost evaluation and quality concerns,
Hmm.
like all from one document.
Yeah.
And I'm going to throw one more thing, and this is a fun little thing for people to know. When you do these documents and you get them all mapped out and you get all of this documentation order, you can actually go get that copyrighted in the US for $60, and now it becomes IP. So you take that document that's now copyrighted and you go put it in the operations binder. And so if you ever decide to sell your business, or somebody comes with a check and wants to buy your business, you can tell them, by the way, this is how the sausage is made, and here's the exact formula for that.
That's really cool. Yeah, that's a neat aspect that I would imagine most people don't even think about.
No, and it
Yeah,
bumps your valuation up. So when you're going
yeah.
to get a valuation, you can say, by the way, here's the documentation I have to support this, not just the financials, but here's the processes too.
Yeah. The other thing too, I think as well that I don't want to brush over quickly is the fact that once you've mapped things out, now you can start to look at optimizing it. So just like what you were saying, you do that analysis with your team in terms of, okay, so what level of frustration are you at? Where are some of the potential breakpoints are? You fix those first, and then it's like, okay, so now is there a better way to do this, right? Is there a better way to implement some of these steps? Because me as the operations guy, right now as a CEO holding the reins of that as well, or if it's you have an operations manager in your business who is managing that aspect, they still aren't the ones who are doing the doing. So you have an idea as to what it should be done and what that process should look like. But until you map it out, there's no way you're going to ever be able to evaluate whether or not there's room for improvements, right?
Yeah, because then you're just going off of hearsay, or I think so, or I thought it was this way, or
Yeah.
and I have to say that I think one of the challenges and things that I'm worried about, by the way, as an operations person, I don't want to say I'm not anti people, but people are definitely complicate the processes.
Yeah.
So
That's a good way to
when
put it.
so when your IP is in that key employee, that means it's not documented, it's not written down. That key employee goes away. You just lost your intellectual property, and they
Yeah,
might have
that's a good way to look
they,
at it.
they know the customers, they know that key process, whatever. You need to hedge against that potential change, right? I mean, life happens to people and people go, and so if it's not documented or if it's not written down, it essentially doesn't exist.
Yeah, yeah. I always used to call that the hit by the bus test, right? So if anybody within your organization gets hit by a bus, what happens tomorrow? If you don't have the processes document, who's going to pick up where they left off, right? And it sounds kind of callous, but I mean that's the same applies if they were to quit, or if they were to get fired, or whatever the case might be, right? Or
Yeah,
they
I,
have an
I
illness.
I like to say hit by a bus or wins the lottery. So then we can
No,
get
the wins the lottery. Maybe it's a little nicer way to look at it.
yeah.
But yeah, so I'm also there's a tool that my team has started to use to help to document some of the processes in our business, and it's called Scribe. It's an AI
Yeah.
tool. Have you heard of that one? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so for the listeners out there, basically what it is you. This only works in kind of the knowledge space because it's tracking what you're doing with your computer mouse and so on, and the screens that you're going to and the things you're clicking on and so on. So just as a simple example for our listeners, if you had a process of like, okay, so when a customer inquiry comes in, what is the flow of different tasks to get it, say, to a salesperson to actually follow up with them, right? And so you would record, then you just hit the record button, the screen record button, and go through the process of, grabbing the information out of that form if it comes in as a form. And then, you enter it into the CRM, and this is where the different fields get entered into. And then you move on to, click this button, do this, and so on. And then all of a sudden the salesperson that gets it. Well, that process of just recording that, it'll actually build out a whole guide step by step and where you're supposed to click and everything. And so it's a really slick tool. it doesn't build out the process map, but it's definitely a good way of documenting processes, and then you can visualize it after that, I think.
Yeah, and on that note, I think, one of the other key things that I'm listening for in my sales process is when someone goes, "Well, we need SOPs." I'm like, "Great, which SOPs do you want to do?" And they're like, the important ones." I'm like, "Okay, great." That tool is really great for documenting SOPs and doing those processes. Um, I think the level that we try to get people to go is kind of one step above that with the meta process of kind of the workflow. But even using a tool like that to do kind of the meta concepts of it is also great. I mean, again, document, document, document. And if we can understand kind of the roadmap of how things are supposed to flow, that's a great starting point then for everyone to agree to and kind of follow through on. But I definitely recommend, though, when someone says we want to do SOPs, great, do SOPs, but pause really fast, take one step back and go, okay, what's the meta process that's over those SOPs? Do we have that documented? Okay, great, we do. Because I think that whole power rule thing, 20% of your business is going to make 80% of your money. Really make sure that if you're going to do SOPs, just do them for the key processes of that. How to open the mail, you don't need an SOP for it. And maybe you do. But there's probably 1,000 other SOPs that you would write before how to
But yeah,
open your
yeah.
mail.
No, I was just using that as just a quick little example for it, for sure.
Oh yeah, totally. Sorry, no, it's a little bit of maybe a little weird, quirky thing when I hear SOPs. I'm like, yes, yes, and so. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a great tool, and I have a client that uses it and they love it.
Yeah, for sure. Now, one of the things that I'm also curious about, and I think this is where a lot of frustration happens at the CEO desk anyway, is you invest all this time and energy in mapping things out, visualizing it, maybe creating a bunch of SOPs and everything else. So you've got everything dialed in. You're like, okay, this is great. But then it's about the execution of it and making sure that people are actually following the processes. So, do you have any advice on that? Because I personally in our business, we have some really well thought out, documented, visualized, and then written SOPs for a lot of our key processes, and then there will be some sort of failure along the way, right? That execution failure, and when we pull back the covers and we do a little bit of investigating, they didn't even follow the SOP, right? They didn't follow the processes. They, even though they knew and they were trained on it, they didn't actually follow it. So, what advice do you give in terms of really creating, I guess, a culture that that really does embrace and revisits these SOPs and processes?
I like how you're asking the operations person about the people part of it. If something doesn't function, you replace it. No, I listen. Before you go fire your key employees, like don't do that. Um, I think again, maybe just taking one step back from this whole. It's a great question. There's an old adage: you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it
Yeah,
drink.
yeah,
I There are real challenges to going through this process. Everyone, I've been on numerous teams where people are excited. Yay, the operations guy is here. He's going to get this all sorted and he's going to figure this all out for us. But I don't think what they realize is there's a cost to that.
yeah, yeah,
The processes and systems and kind of culture that led to this point, yay, it led to success. You're a million in revenue. Great. You want to get to you want to 5X this thing. Everything you've done up to this point, it's not necessarily going to scale because Bob's the only one that knows this. And documentation's in 6 places and only 3 people know where all it lives and all of this mess. It's going to compound ridiculously when you try to go to scale. And so you have to kind of take a bigger look at this and get these things clean and fixed and sorted so you can scale. Um, and so I think the challenge is when you bring on a operations person, kind of a couple prescripts that I have to kind of load up when I come in. One is the team that got you here is not the team that's going to get you there. And
mm,
and I only say that because there are people that are really great at like startup culture. Hey, we can wear whatever we want and we can come in when we want, or we've got all of these benefits. And, I'm the guy that knows everything. Okay, cool. We're going to tolerate that because we need it. And do you know what I'm saying? Like, I'm not trying to be completely rude, but that culture and whatever was set that gets you to this point, when you go to that next path, it's not everyone's going to make that journey over the
Yeah.
valley or the
Yeah.
bridge. And so one, I have to have a conversation with the CEO to say that. Two, we try to understand who the key people are and key resources and document that. And so when we approach those people, they identify with the role or the job or the task. And so we say, hey, we want to get this down. If they're on the worst end, a knowledge hoarder, they're thinking, oh my gosh, my job security is going away because I was the only person that knew how this whole thing works. And now they're taking that from me. They're going to be resistant to it. They're going to fight it. And, you're going to get problems. If your business is relying on that person wins the lottery, gets hit by a bus, that person definitely is going to cause problems for you. So I think documenting and showing them, like, listen, we want to document this because we want to give you more capacity. We want to see which pieces of that job we can actually hand off to other people, and you can then do the stuff that you do really good at. Like, let's keep feeding that part of you. And so there's a document that I have. If people want, they can email me or reach out. It's called the barriers to process change. And so I look at these key common areas that people run into when they do this. And so with those people that identify with the job, we have to basically make sure that we kind of surround them in love and then kind of coax them to give us the information we need and do that. Um, so again, sorry, coming back to this about culture change and everything else, one is there's going to be changes. Not everyone's going to make it. Two, we have to basically understand that some people identify as the process. And so we need to be careful of that. And I think the third big one is your team needs to be on board to the changes that you're making. So even when people are like, well, we're just documenting it, we're not changing anything. No, like 9 times out of 10, when I sit down with the CEO and we'll go through the process and they're like, this is how it works. And they're like, oh, actually, no, I don't like that. I'm going to go talk to Bob and fix that right now. Like, they're going to start implementing changes right away. And so we want to be conscientious of that. And we want to make sure the staff has buy-in. So when we do this, we want to basically tell everyone, listen, we're documenting all of this because we want to get all of the stuff you don't like off your plate. We want to make sure that everybody's passing good information to each other because we're trying to make sure the client gets the best experience that we can. You get people on board with that. You show them kind of the stages of how we're developing these processes. They're going to have feedback. They're going to have insights. I mean, boots on the ground. I love leadership and everything else, but boots on the ground, they're the ones in it. They know what's going on.
Yeah.
They need to be contributing to that.
Yeah.
So that's
Yeah.
that third piece to that.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Okay. So one of the things that you mentioned when we had a previous conversation is that you made a statement and said small businesses sometimes die from success due to unmanaged complexities. What did you mean by that exactly?
Well, especially with service-based businesses, they tend to start the business because they're passionate for what they do, and so they want to do that, and they're working for somebody else, and they decide to go out on their own. And so initially, it's them and the client right there, shaking hands, making a deal, and doing the work. Then they hire the bookkeeper or an administrative assistant, and they start adding these little complexities and more components. And so each person you add, you have to manage that relationship between them and between the whole organization. The best joke I could give you really fast on the side note is, we had two kids growing up, and there's an Icelandic proverb that one kid is like no kid, two kids is like many, because there's the individual personalities, but then there's the interactions between them. And
Yeah.
so with your business, each component that you add, each new member, each new process, each new product and service, it adds a layer of complexity. And so what you wind up doing is making the system that's really complex that nobody's managing it. So by default, everything falls on the founder or the owner. And so then you have an owner and founder that's working 60, 80, 100 hours a week. They're stressed out. They're making great money on the revenue side, maybe profit side, not so much. And so even though, they were extremely happy at 200,000, they're absolutely miserable at 750,000 because they're working way too many hours. They're taking time off. There's always problems. And so that's the people I work well with, because it's like, hey, listen, I hate to say it, but the cash is not the problem, and the client acquisition is not the problem. It's just the fulfillment piece of it, and it's the like CEO is miserable. Let's fix that. Like, and that's a fixable problem. It really is. I mean, the CEO will have to have like a come to Jesus kind of moment to say like, okay, I'm getting in the way of this. Let's fix this and ask for help. Great. Then those are the people we can step in and we can kind of get those things off their plate. We can get things structured and organized. We'll have to take a few steps back and kind of restructure and reformulate some things. But then that gives them the platform then to continue to grow and to continue to move forward. And, I've looked at situations and scenarios where I've been able to get people back. One CEO, I got her 20 hours a week back. Another business broker, I got him about 30 to 40 hours a month back because he spent the weekends doing a lot of updates and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's there and it's possible. And so, currently, if you're in pain with this success and you're like, man, I was happier when we were less successful, that's the time where you definitely need to get some operations help.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, this is the dream that everybody has, is how do I get my business to the place where I'm not spending as much time on it or in it, that it's a well-oiled operating machine, right? I mean, we're building businesses for usually two primary purposes, and it's not exclusively this, but two big motivators are time freedom and, financial freedom is what we're really aiming for. And so one of the problems with most of us, especially when we're in that, sub million, but even you could say sub 2 million or so, we're so involved in the operations that it is really difficult to remove yourself and find that time. And so, yeah, like to hear stories of you saving somebody 20 hours a week, like it's like, oh man, I really wish I could have that. And this is the great thing, is you are here for all of us business owners to really tap into. So if somebody wanted to connect with you, and I got another question for you, so I don't think you get to escape yet, but
I almost thought I made it. Go ahead.
if somebody wanted to connect with you just to learn more about what you do and how you help businesses, what's the best way for them to, reach you?
So one is my website, thinkadaptbuild.com. That's all one word. The other one, LinkedIn. Follow me on LinkedIn. I talk about these things. I share tips, tricks, everything else. Get to know my personality and my approach. Heck, even glean some free stuff until you get to a place where you're ready to pull the trigger. Yeah, that would be great. And then I could send you something for your show notes too, if you want to throw anything in there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, we'll definitely connect or put your connection details into the show notes for sure. Okay, so my last question for you, and then we'll let you go because I know you're a busy guy. You got lots of businesses that you're trying to help with. Um, there's a lot of, I guess, talk around AI and how AI is going to impact businesses. And from an operations standpoint, there's a lot of things that one could potentially automate. I'm curious, when you're working with CEOs today, with now AI here, how do you determine, or how do you help them determine which tasks they can automate, which tasks they can delegate, and which tasks really need to be eliminated to free up their time and reduce that overall stress burden that they have as they're building their business?
yeah, I think this really like cycles back to that first question of like, as an entrepreneur, like what insight do you have from that? And so even in my own practice, I use AI. I have it help me with reading through emails and updating our CRM and just these small tasks that could be taken on by an executive administrative assistant. You know, I now have automations that take care of it. So I've found tasks that are highly repetitive, that our documentation, because we're trying to keep good records on things and good reporting, those elements I've got AI and automations going for a lot of that stuff. And so here's the thing with technology, it's not new. I mean, it is, the AI is a newer concept, but if we put AI or technology and treat it as an employee, what expectations do we have for it? What's the job description for it? How do we measure that it's doing what it's supposed to do? That's how you treat AI. So this, if you batch together the automations that I have and the different services I pay for, I probably pay about $200 a month for this virtual person, if we call it that, and I treat it as such. So hey, I check in on it. Are you doing what you're supposed to? Are you following through? Are you, how much time did you save me? I know all of that and I have that information. So I think for CEOs, when they think about AI and using it, first identify, do the time audit, and find those tasks that are repetitive that you're doing over and over again that you could give to somebody else. If you get to somebody else and it's repetitive again, then AI probably could take that task on. And so then we just come up with a solution for it. And once you get a handful of tasks that can be done by AI, then hire someone to build that for you. And you literally are going to buy back your time at a very nice return rate.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time today. It's rare that I get to have somebody on this show that has so much knowledge and so much expertise in a particular area that is so critical to the success of our businesses. And so I know our audience definitely gleaned a lot out of this conversation that you and I have had. I know I have. And I just really want to sincerely thank you for your time today, Joshua.
Oh, thanks for having me and sharing this. I mean, if anyone could do any one of these things, I think it will help them. So.
Yeah, awesome. So for everybody who's listening today, if you enjoyed this episode and you want to check out more expert advice as well as entrepreneur stories, so you can learn from those who have, done the things that you're trying to do today, then head over to amplifyyourbusiness.ca. That's where you're going to find our archive. And of course, you can find all of our past episodes in the audio format on your favorite podcasting platform by just searching Amplify Your Business. Until next time, everybody have a prosperous day.